The call came in at 9:07 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was standing in courtroom 4B, waiting for a custody hearing to begin, when my phone started vibrating nonstop in my pocket. My wife never called me 3 times in a row. Not unless someone was dead. The judge hadn't arrived yet. Attorneys were chatting in clusters near the benches. Clients sat nervously beside people they no longer trusted enough to live with. I stepped into the hallway and answered, "Megan?" All I heard at first was breathing, then crying. Not loud crying, not hysterical crying, the kind people do when they're trying desperately not to panic. "Megan, what's wrong?" "David," she whispered. Her voice shook. "I saw something." I rubbed my forehead. "What happened?" There was a pause. Then she said something so absurd I almost laughed. "A woman bit a man's throat open in the grocery store parking lot." I leaned against the wall. "Megan, I'm serious." "I know you're serious." "No, you don't." The words came out sharp enough to stop me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she continued. "I was loading groceries into the car. There was screaming. Everyone turned around." She swallowed hard. "A woman was on top of a man. I thought she was attacking him. Then I saw the blood." I closed my eyes. There were a dozen explanations. Drugs, mental illness, random violence. America wasn't exactly short on any of those. "You called 911? "Everyone did." "Then let them handle it." Another silence, then she whispered something that made the hairs on my arm stand up. "David, after she was pulled off him?" "Yeah, the man got back up." I frowned. "What?" "He got back up." "Megan." I watched, half his neck hanging open. My stomach tightened. He stood up. The courthouse hallway suddenly felt colder. Not because I believed her, because I believed she believed it. Megan wasn't dramatic. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't someone who exaggerated. For 12 years, she'd been the most grounded person I'd ever known, which made her fear more unsettling than the story itself. "Where are you now?" "Home." "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Then stay there." "What if—" "Stay home." I glanced toward the courtroom doors. The hearing would start any minute. "I'll come by after court." "David." "What?" Her breathing hitched. I don't think this is one crazy person. I almost told her she was overreacting. Almost. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the trembling in her voice. Maybe it was the fact she had never sounded afraid like this. Not even when tornado sirens hit our neighborhood 3 years earlier. "Lock the doors," I said. "Okay. And call me if anything else happens." She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded small. "Nobody believed me there." "What do you mean?" "The police." My stomach tightened again. "They thought I was in shock." "What exactly did you tell them?" "The truth." The answer came instantly, without hesitation. That bothered me more than anything else, because people who imagined things usually doubted themselves. Megan wasn't doubting herself at all. She sounded absolutely certain. I ended the call feeling irritated, concerned, confused. Mostly I wanted the day to continue normally. I wanted to finish court, drive home, hear a reasonable explanation, move on. Instead, 20 minutes later, my first client collapsed in the hallway, and everything began. His name was Robert Calloway. 42, divorced twice, angry at everybody. The kind of client who treated every conversation like an argument. One second he was yelling at opposing counsel. The next second he grabbed a wall. Then he dropped. People rushed toward him. Someone shouted for a medic. I moved automatically. Years of courtroom work had trained me to react before thinking. Robert's eyes were open. His body shook violently. Foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. A woman screamed. Another person backed away. "Seizure?" someone asked. "Maybe. It looked like one." At first, then Robert stopped moving. Completely. The hallway fell silent. The paramedics arrived within minutes. By then he wasn't breathing. People stepped aside as they worked. I should have gone back into court. Instead, I stood there watching. Something felt wrong. Not dramatic, not supernatural, just wrong. One paramedic pressed two fingers against Robert's neck, then looked at his partner. The look lasted maybe half a second, but it bothered me because it wasn't concern, it was confusion, as if something wasn't behaving the way it should. A minute later, Robert's eyes opened. The paramedic jerked backward. Everyone nearby froze, including me. Robert sat upright. Fast, too fast. His movements looked disconnected from the exhaustion of someone who had just stopped breathing. People gasped. Someone laughed nervously. Relief, that's what everyone wanted. A normal explanation. A medical emergency with a happy ending. Robert slowly turned his head, looking at faces, one by one, expressionless. Then he lunged. Not at the paramedics, at his own attorney. The bite landed on the man's shoulder. Chaos exploded, and suddenly my wife's impossible story didn't sound impossible anymore. The attack lasted maybe 10 seconds. It felt like 10 minutes. Robert's attorney screamed. The paramedics tackled him. People ran in every direction. Court officers flooded the hallway. The sound was overwhelming. Shouting, furniture crashing, phones hitting floors, someone crying. I stood frozen. Not because I didn't understand what was happening, because my brain refused to classify it. Humans weren't supposed to behave like that. The bite wasn't anger. It wasn't self-defense. It wasn't even violence in the normal sense. It looked like hunger. Pure, mindless, animal hunger. A court officer finally grabbed my arm. Move! The command snapped me awake. I followed the crowd toward an emergency stairwell. Dozens of people shoved through the doors. Nobody knew anything. Rumors spread instantly. Drug outbreak, terror attack, chemical exposure, rabies. Every explanation sounded ridiculous. Every explanation sounded better than the truth. My phone vibrated. Megan, I answered immediately. David, I'm okay. Her relief lasted less than a second. Then she heard the noise behind me. What happened? I looked down the stairwell. People were running, some upward, some downward. No organization, no instructions. Just fear. I think I saw the same thing you saw. Silence, then. You believe me now? I didn't answer, because I did, and that realization terrified me. The courthouse announced a lockdown 10 minutes later. The order came through building speakers. Everyone remain calm, remain in place, await instructions. The words had the opposite effect. People stopped trusting instructions the moment they heard panic in the voice delivering them. And there was definitely panic. I made a decision. Maybe the smartest decision I made that entire day. Maybe the luckiest. I left, not through the front entrance, through a maintenance exit used by building staff. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait for updates. I didn't stay to gather information. I went home because my wife had seen this first, and because some instinct I still can't explain told me every minute mattered. Outside, the city looked normal. Traffic moved. People walked sidewalks. Restaurants served lunch. The sky was bright and clear. If I hadn't seen Robert attack someone with my own eyes, I would have believed the world was fine. That illusion lasted 3 blocks. Then I passed an intersection. 3 police cars, an ambulance, a city bus sitting sideways across 2 lanes. People recording with phones, nobody helping. I slowed. A paramedic was on the ground. 2 officers struggled to restrain someone. The person kept trying to bite them. Not punch, not escape, bite. My stomach dropped. Megan had been right. Hours before anyone else, somehow she'd seen the beginning. And nobody listened, including me. I called her immediately. She answered on the first ring. I'm almost home. Good. Something in her voice sounded different. Tighter, more afraid. What happened? The neighbors. I gripped the steering wheel. What about them? Mrs. Hanley called me. The Hanleys lived across the street. Retired, quiet, perfectly ordinary. Her husband collapsed. I felt cold. And he attacked the EMTs, the same pattern, exactly the same. My pulse accelerated. How many incidents were happening now? 10? 100? 1,000? Nobody on the news seemed concerned enough. Radio stations were still discussing traffic. Television still covered politics. The world hadn't caught up yet. Reality was moving faster than information, and that gap was about to kill people. I reached our neighborhood 15 minutes later. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not total silence. Absence of routine. No lawnmowers, no children, no dogs barking. People had gone inside. They sensed something. Maybe not consciously, but they sensed it. The second thing I noticed was Mrs. Hanley sitting alone on her front porch, crying. My chest tightened, because her husband wasn't beside her anymore, and I already knew why. The outbreak had no official name yet. No emergency declaration, no government response, but standing there looking at that grieving woman, I realized something. The outbreak had already started. The world simply hadn't admitted it yet. And according to my wife, we had been given a 3-hour warning. A warning nobody believed, including me, and I couldn't stop wondering what would have happened if I had listened. Megan met me at the front door before I could even get my key into the lock. The moment she saw my face, she knew. I didn't have to tell her. I didn't have to explain what I'd seen. She read it immediately. You saw it too? I nodded. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she wrapped her arms around me. Not because she was seeking comfort, because she was terrified of being right. People always imagine validation feels good. It doesn't when the thing being validated is a nightmare. Inside, our house felt strangely normal. Coffee cups sat on the kitchen counter. A half-folded laundry basket rested on the couch. Sunlight spilled through the dining room windows. The ordinary details made everything outside feel even more unreal. Megan opened her laptop. I've been tracking reports. The screen displayed local social media posts, videos, photos, emergency scanner transcripts, dozens of incidents, all following the same pattern: collapse, convulsions, recovery, attack. The timeline repeated so often it couldn't be coincidence. I sat beside her. Has anyone officially said anything? She shook her head. Nothing useful. Another video loaded. A man recording from inside a pharmacy. People shouting, shelves overturned, someone biting a store employee. The recording ended abruptly. Neither of us spoke. Then my phone rang. It was Judge Hammond, the judge assigned to my custody case. I answered. Judge? His voice sounded exhausted. David, where are you? Home. Good. The answer surprised me. You're not asking me to return? No. A long pause followed. Then he lowered his voice. The courthouse is gone. I felt my stomach drop. What? Multiple attacks. He exhaled shakily. Police lost control. I looked at Megan. Her expression hardened. The warning she had tried to give people 3 hours earlier was now reality. Judge Hammond continued. Whatever this is, stay away from public buildings. Then he hung up. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. But it changed everything, because until then, part of me still believed authorities would regain control. Now even judges sounded scared. That illusion died quickly. Outside, sirens multiplied. Helicopters appeared overhead. Phones began vibrating simultaneously across the neighborhood. Emergency alerts. The message was short. Reports of extreme violent behavior throughout multiple counties. Avoid public areas. Shelter in place. No explanation, no details, no reassurance. Just instructions. The government didn't know what was happening, and that realization frightened me more than the alert itself. By late afternoon, the first official press conference aired. We watched from the living room. The governor stood behind a podium. Doctors, police officials, emergency managers, all trying desperately to sound confident. None succeeding. A reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. Are the attackers infected? The governor hesitated. Only for a moment. But we noticed. Everyone noticed. That hesitation told the truth before his answer did. The outbreak had already outrun certainty. By sunset, helicopters had become constant. The city skyline glowed with emergency lights. And somewhere beyond our neighborhood, the first day of the zombie outbreak officially began. 3 hours after my wife had tried to warn people. 3 hours after nobody believed her. 3 hours that might have saved thousands of lives. And now they were gone forever. The next morning felt wrong. Not chaotic, not violent. Wrong. As if the world had slipped slightly out of alignment overnight. The power still worked. Water still ran. Cell service still existed. But confidence had vanished. Every television channel showed emergency coverage. Every news anchor looked exhausted. Every official statement contradicted another. The outbreak wasn't spreading like a disease people understood. Some victims turned within minutes. Others took hours. Doctors couldn't identify a clear transmission pattern. Hospitals overflowed anyway. Megan sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. She hadn't slept. Neither had I. "What are you looking at?" She handed me the screen. The grocery store. The one where she'd witnessed the first attack. Security footage had leaked online. The video quality was terrible, but the incident was visible. The woman, the victim, the impossible recovery. Everything. I watched twice, then 3 times. My chest tightened, because Megan's account had been perfect. Every detail, every second. She hadn't exaggerated anything. She hadn't misunderstood anything. She had told the truth, and everyone ignored her. Including me. I looked at her. "I'm sorry," she frowned. "For what?" I should have listened. For the first time since the outbreak began, tears filled her eyes again. Not fear this time. Relief. Because someone finally believed her. Even if it came too late. Around noon, another call arrived. This one from Detective Sarah Ruiz, a county investigator. I knew her professionally. We'd crossed paths during several legal cases. Her voice sounded strained. "David, I need to ask your wife some questions." Megan looked up immediately. "What kind of questions?" Sarah hesitated. "Your wife may be one of the earliest confirmed witnesses." The phrase landed heavily. Earliest confirmed witness. Megan wasn't just somebody who saw something strange anymore. She had seen the beginning. Sarah arrived an hour later. No police cruiser, no uniform, just a tired woman carrying a folder. The moment she entered our house, she got straight to business. "Walk me through everything." Megan did, from entering the grocery store, to hearing screams, to seeing the attack, to speaking with officers. Sarah took notes quietly. Then she asked a strange question. "Did the woman say anything?" Megan frowned. "What?" "Words, phrases, anything unusual?" Megan thought carefully. Then her face changed, a memory surfacing. "Actually," Sarah leaned forward. "What?" She kept repeating something. The detective froze. "What was it?" Megan swallowed. "I don't know exactly." "Try." It sounded like... She closed her eyes, trying to remember. Then she whispered, "They're already here." The room fell silent. Sarah stared at her notebook, then slowly closed it, and for the first time she looked genuinely frightened. After Sarah left, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. They're already here, not coming, not arriving, already here. The phrase didn't fit the outbreak. It sounded like a warning, or a realization. Something discovered too late. That night, reports exploded nationwide. Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Seattle, thousands of incidents, then tens of thousands. The outbreak wasn't spreading across America, it was appearing everywhere simultaneously. That changed everything, because outbreaks have origins. This didn't. No patient zero, no ground zero, no obvious beginning, just eruption. Like something hidden had suddenly become visible. Around midnight, Sarah called again. Her voice was lower than before. "David, are you alone?" I glanced at Megan. "No." "Good." The answer surprised me. Then Sarah continued. "We've reviewed more witness statements." "What did you find?" A pause. Multiple people heard the same phrase. My pulse accelerated. "The same words?" "Exactly the same." I looked at Megan. She looked back. Neither of us liked where this was going. "How many witnesses?" 23. The number stunned me. 23 separate people, different locations, different states, different attacks, same phrase. Sarah sounded exhausted. Whatever this is, the victims seem aware of something before they turn. Like what? I don't know. For the first time, she sounded completely lost. And detectives hate being lost. Before hanging up, she said one final thing. Trust your wife. Then the line disconnected. That simple statement stayed with me. Trust your wife. Not trust authorities. Not trust official reports. Trust the witness. The person everyone dismissed. The person who saw the truth first. The person closest to me. And for the first time since the outbreak began, I wondered whether Megan had seen more than she'd realized. The answer arrived the following morning, and it changed the direction of everything. Megan was standing at the kitchen window drinking coffee when she suddenly froze. Completely froze. The mug slipped from her hand, shattered across the floor. I rushed toward her. Megan? She pointed outside, across the street, at Mrs. Hanley's house. What? Her voice barely emerged. The man. I looked. At first I saw nothing, then I saw movement. Inside the second-floor bedroom, a silhouette, standing motionless behind the curtains. Watching. My stomach dropped, because Mr. Hanley had died 2 days earlier. We knew he had. Everyone knew. An ambulance had taken him away. Yet something stood inside that room, looking directly toward our house. Neither of us spoke. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't blink, just watched, then slowly stepped backward into darkness and disappeared. Megan turned toward me, her face pale. He was doing that before. What? The morning of the outbreak. Every muscle in my body tightened. What do you mean? She swallowed. I saw him standing in that exact window. The room suddenly felt smaller. When? 3 hours before I went to the grocery store. A horrible realization formed. Not because of what she'd seen, because she'd forgotten it. The memory only returned now, as if her mind hadn't considered it important, until today. Until she saw it again. And suddenly the timeline shifted. Maybe the grocery store wasn't the beginning. Maybe the signs had appeared earlier. Maybe witnesses had been seeing things for days. Things nobody considered significant. Things nobody reported. Things nobody connected. I stared at the dark bedroom window across the street, and for the first time I stopped asking how the outbreak started. Instead, I began asking a far more frightening question. How long had it already been here? The question haunted me for the next 48 hours. How long had it already been here? By then, society had entered a strange middle stage between order and collapse. Banks still open. Some stores still operated. Emergency broadcasts still aired. But nobody trusted anything anymore. People weren't living normally. They were waiting for bad news, waiting for power failures, waiting for a phone call that never came, waiting for someone they loved to stop acting like themselves. The uncertainty was worse than the violence. Violence at least gave you something concrete. Uncertainty infected every decision, every conversation, every silence. Megan spent most of her time reviewing local reports. Not because she enjoyed it, because she couldn't stop. The witness instinct had taken over. She wanted answers, needed them. One afternoon, she called me into the dining room. You need to see this. 3 laptops covered the table. Maps, news reports, witness statements, handwritten notes. The setup looked less like a home and more like an investigation center. What am I looking at? She pointed to a map. Red circles marked outbreak incidents, thousands of them. No pattern, I guessed. That's what everyone thinks. She zoomed in, then farther again. At first I didn't see it. Then suddenly I did. My stomach tightened. The circles weren't random, not completely. They clustered around something. Not roads, not population density, not hospitals, neighborhoods, residential areas. Particularly older neighborhoods, areas where people knew each other. Places with long-term social connections. I stared at the screen. That's impossible. I know. No outbreak works like that. I know, but there it was. Visible, disturbing, real. The infected weren't appearing primarily in transportation hubs, not in airports, not in downtown districts, not in crowded entertainment centers. The earliest incidents kept appearing inside communities, places built on relationships, family, friendship, familiarity. The pattern made no sense, which meant it mattered. A knock interrupted us. 3 quick knocks, then 2 more. Sarah Ruiz. The detective looked worse every time we saw her, dark circles under her eyes, wrinkled clothes, the exhausted posture of somebody running on determination alone. The moment she entered, Megan showed her the map. Sarah studied it, slowly, then sat down. You're not going to like what I'm about to tell you. Nobody ever says that before good news. She opened a folder. Inside were interview transcripts, witness statements, police reports, dozens of them. We've identified something. My pulse accelerated. What? Sarah looked directly at Megan. The earliest confirmed victims all reported seeing someone they knew. Silence. Complete silence. What? The word left my mouth automatically. Sarah continued. Family members. She turned a page. Former spouses. Another page. Old friends. Another. Neighbors. I felt cold. What does that mean? Her expression darkened. We don't know. That answer terrified me, because Sarah wasn't guessing. She genuinely didn't know. And if professional investigators couldn't explain it, that meant the evidence was leading somewhere uncomfortable. Something beyond disease models, beyond epidemiology, beyond anything authorities understood. Then Sarah said something none of us expected. We think the outbreak may have been visible before people became infected. The room went silent again. Megan slowly sat down. Visible how? Sarah hesitated, like she hated the words she was about to say. People reported seeing familiar individuals behaving strangely. The air felt heavier. Examples? I asked. Sarah slid several reports across the table. A man staring into a neighbor's window for 6 hours. A woman standing motionless outside her sister's house all night. Former classmates appearing in neighborhoods where they didn't live. People watching, waiting, observing. Always familiar faces, always somebody known, never strangers. I remembered Mr. Hanley standing behind the curtains, watching before the outbreak. My heartbeat accelerated, because suddenly that memory wasn't isolated anymore. It belonged to a pattern, and patterns meant intent. That night none of us slept, because for the first time since the outbreak began, the question wasn't whether people were infected. The question was what happened before they became infected. And that question was far worse. The power failed on the 4th day, not permanently, just long enough to remind everyone how fragile things had become. The neighborhood changed immediately. Generators started. Porch lights disappeared. People emerged cautiously from houses, looking for information, looking for reassurance, looking for proof they weren't alone. Instead, they found fear. Rumors moved faster than electricity. By afternoon, somebody claimed the military was evacuating cities. Another person claimed nuclear plants had shut down. Someone else swore the internet would disappear by nightfall. Nobody knew what was true anymore. Facts had become casualties. Megan, however, stayed focused. She wasn't interested in rumors, only observations, only evidence, only patterns. That evening, she discovered something disturbing. Every witness who reported pre-outbreak anomalies described the same emotion. Not fear, not anger, recognition. They all remembered thinking some variation of the same sentence. I know that person, even when they shouldn't have, even when the person had no reason to be there. The realization unsettled me deeply, because recognition creates trust. Trust lowers defenses. Trust changes behavior. And suddenly I began wondering whether the outbreak wasn't spreading through biology alone. Maybe it spread through something older, something human. Familiarity, connection. The people we automatically let closer. The people we don't question. The people we believe belong. That idea terrified me, because there was no vaccine against trust. Later that night, we heard screaming, real screaming, close, not from television, not from social media, from outside. The neighborhood reacted instantly. Lights switched on, doors open. People looked outside. I stepped onto the porch. Halfway down the street, a crowd had gathered. Someone shouted, someone cried. Then came the unmistakable sound of panic. Megan joined me. What happened? Before I could answer, Mrs. Hanley appeared running barefoot down the road. I barely recognized her. Her face was pale, tear-streaked, terrified. He came back, the words hit like ice water. What? My husband. Every conversation stopped. Every movement froze. Mrs. Hanley pointed toward her house. He's inside. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved, because everyone understood exactly who she meant. And everyone knew he was supposed to be dead. 5 neighbors entered the house. I went with them. Not because I was brave, because uncertainty had become unbearable. The house smelled normal, looked normal. Nothing seemed wrong. Then we reached the second floor and found the bedroom. Empty, completely empty. No intruder, no infected, no sign of forced entry. Nothing. The room looked untouched. Several neighbors immediately relaxed. False alarm, stress, trauma, grief. Easy explanations, comforting explanations. Then Megan pointed toward the floor, and everything changed. A line of muddy footprints crossed the carpet, starting at the window, ending at the bedroom door. Everyone saw them. Nobody spoke, because the footprints proved one thing. Mrs. Hanley hadn't imagined it. Something had been there. Watching, again. The discovery spread through the neighborhood by morning. Nobody discussed zombies. Nobody discussed infection. Instead, they discussed watchers, people standing outside houses, people appearing where they shouldn't, people observing friends, family, neighbors. The stories multiplied rapidly, too rapidly. Every conversation seemed to uncover another. A cousin seen standing in a backyard before turning infected. A brother watching a house overnight. A coworker appearing repeatedly outside a neighborhood. Always familiar, always recognizable, always wrong. The pattern became impossible to ignore. And then Sarah called with the breakthrough. Her voice sounded shaken, not tired, shaken. David, I need you and Megan to listen carefully. My pulse accelerated. What happened? We found surveillance footage. I looked at Megan. She looked back. Sarah continued. We reviewed recordings from before the outbreak. And? Silence then. The infected weren't choosing targets. Every muscle in my body tightened. What does that mean? Another pause, longer this time, as if Sarah wished she didn't know the answer. Then she said it. They were returning to people who knew them. The room seemed to shrink. The implications arrived instantly. Friends, family, neighbors, former spouses, classmates, co-workers, not random victims, recognized victims. People connected through memory, connected through familiarity, connected through trust. The outbreak wasn't spreading outward, it was spreading inward, through existing human relationships. And suddenly Megan's grocery store witness account looked different. The woman hadn't attacked a stranger. She'd attacked someone who knew her, someone who approached her, someone who didn't immediately run, someone whose defenses had been lowered by recognition. That night, I sat awake long after Megan fell asleep, listening, thinking, watching the dark neighborhood outside. The infected weren't merely predators. They were following old paths, emotional paths, social paths, human paths, the roads people build between one another over years. And for the first time since the outbreak began, I realized something horrifying. The people most likely to hurt you weren't strangers anymore. They were the people you loved enough to open the door for. Because 3 hours before the outbreak, my wife had seen something nobody understood. Now, days later, we were finally beginning to understand it. And the truth was far worse than zombies. The truth was that the outbreak knew exactly where to go. By the end of the first week, nobody in our neighborhood talked about getting back to normal. That phrase had disappeared. Not because people gave up hope, because reality had made the question irrelevant. The outbreak wasn't a storm. It wasn't a temporary crisis. It wasn't something waiting to pass. It was the new condition of the world. Power failures became longer. Supply deliveries became inconsistent. Emergency broadcasts became shorter. Every institution sounded less certain than the day before. The people who adapted fastest weren't the strongest. They weren't the smartest. They were the people who accepted reality first. Megan accepted it before anyone. That was becoming impossible to ignore. The same woman everyone dismissed 3 hours before the outbreak had correctly identified danger before doctors, police, reporters, and politicians. Because she paid attention, because she trusted what she saw, because she didn't force reality to fit expectations. Most people did, including me. I thought about that constantly. A neighborhood meeting formed 3 days later. About 30 residents gathered in the cul-de-sac. No leaders, no official authority, just frightened people trying to make decisions. Arguments started immediately. Some wanted to leave, some wanted to stay. Some believed military aid was coming. Others believed the government had already collapsed. Nobody agreed on anything. Then Mrs. Hanley stood. The crowd quieted. She looked older than she had 2 weeks earlier. Not physically, emotionally, like grief had accelerated time. My husband died, nobody interrupted. He came back. A few people looked uncomfortable. Others nodded. Everyone had heard the story. Mrs. Hanley continued. I don't care what anyone calls them, her voice trembled. Infected, zombies, victims. She swallowed hard. They remember us. Silence. Complete silence. Because everyone knew exactly what she meant. The infected weren't wandering randomly. They returned to homes, to families, to memories. That fact disturbed people more than the attacks themselves. An animal attacks strangers. Something else seeks out people it once loved. The meeting ended without resolution, but it changed the neighborhood. People stopped viewing the outbreak as a public health crisis. They started viewing it as something personal, something intimate, and that shift made everything more frightening. The first large-scale evacuation order arrived on day 9. County authorities announced a relocation center 60 miles north. Food, security, medical care, transportation assistance. On paper, it sounded reasonable, almost comforting. The neighborhood split immediately. Half wanted to leave, half didn't trust it. I wasn't sure. Neither was Megan. The problem wasn't the destination. The problem was the journey. Roads had become unpredictable. Communication was failing. Reports contradicted each other hourly. Travel itself had become dangerous. Then Sarah Ruiz arrived unexpectedly. The detective looked exhausted, but determined. That combination worried me. What happened? She closed the front door behind her. I think the evacuation center is a mistake. My stomach tightened. Why? Sarah dropped several documents onto the table. Maps, transit records, incident reports. The same material she'd been collecting for days. Then she pointed. At first I didn't understand. Then I saw it. The relocation center sat directly inside one of the densest clusters of early outbreak activity. The realization hit hard. That's impossible. I thought so too. Sarah folded her arms. But every data set says the same thing. Megan studied the maps carefully. What are they missing? Sarah looked at her. The pattern. Megan nodded slowly. The pattern, the thing nobody wanted to discuss, the thing connecting memory, familiarity, and infection. Government planners were treating the outbreak like a disease. But if the outbreak followed human relationships instead of geography, then population concentration could make everything worse. Not better. A relocation center might become the perfect trap. Thousands of frightened people, thousands of emotional connections, thousands of pathways, all gathered together. That night we made a decision. We would not evacuate, not yet, not because we felt safe, Because we no longer trusted official assumptions. The outbreak had punished assumptions from the beginning, and we weren't eager to join the list. The attack came 2 nights later. Not a horde, not an invasion. Something worse. Recognition. It started with a knock. 3 soft knocks on the front door. At 2:17 in the morning. Every nerve in my body activated instantly. Nobody should have been visiting. Nobody. Megan woke beside me. The knocking came again. 3 knocks, soft, patient, almost polite. I grabbed a flashlight, moved toward the front window, and froze. A woman stood on the porch, alone, motionless, facing the door. My heart stopped, because I knew her. Not well, but enough. She had worked at a coffee shop downtown. I used to see her twice a week. Same order, same smile, same casual conversations. The familiarity hit immediately. Automatic, human, dangerous. The exact thing we'd been discussing for days. Megan appeared beside me. "What is she doing?" I didn't answer, because the woman slowly lifted her head and looked directly toward the window, as if she knew we were there. The knocking resumed. 3 taps, patient, deliberate, not frantic, not aggressive. The behavior felt horribly wrong, like somebody following instructions they only partially understood. The woman remained there for almost an hour, never leaving, never attacking, never speaking, just waiting. Eventually she walked away, slowly, calmly, disappearing into darkness. Neither of us slept afterwards, because something fundamental had changed. The infected weren't simply following old relationships. They were searching for them, actively, intentionally. And if that was true, every person in the world carried an invisible map of vulnerabilities. Their own memories, their own connections, their own past. The outbreak didn't need to learn where to find people. People had already taught it. 3 days later, Sarah returned, this time carrying a single folder. No maps, no reports, no evidence boards. Just one folder, which frightened me more than any stack of documents, because it meant she finally believed she understood something, and certainty had become rare. We sat around the kitchen table. Sarah opened the folder. Inside were interviews from early victims, not infected survivors. There weren't any. Witnesses. People who interacted with victims before transformation. Sarah pointed to highlighted passages, one after another. The wording changed, the details changed, but the meaning stayed the same. Every future victim described a similar feeling. Not sickness, not pain, not confusion, recognition, an overwhelming fixation on specific people. People from their lives. People from their memories. People they couldn't stop thinking about. I read several statements. Each one made my stomach tighten further. The pattern was undeniable. The outbreak wasn't beginning with violence. Violence came later. It began with obsession, connection, memory, attention. Then, Sarah delivered the most disturbing conclusion she'd reached. We've been asking the wrong question. Nobody spoke. She continued. We keep asking how infection spreads. Megan nodded. What should we be asking? Sarah looked directly at us. Why does it choose certain people first? Silence. Because none of us had an answer, and because we all understood what that question implied. There was still something fundamental we didn't understand, something hidden beneath everything. Something Megan had accidentally glimpsed before anyone else. And whatever it was, we were getting closer, whether we wanted to or not. By the second week, the neighborhood had become smaller, not physically, emotionally. The world beyond our streets felt distant now, abstract. Most news stations had gone dark. Internet service worked intermittently. Cell networks struggled under constant failures. Information arrived in fragments, rumors, half-confirmed reports, emergency transmissions. Nothing complete, nothing trustworthy. The only things people truly believed were the things they'd seen themselves. And that's exactly how this entire nightmare had started. Megan saw something. Nobody believed her. Then reality caught up. Sarah Ruiz arrived just after sunrise on day 14. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. She looked defeated, not exhausted, not overwhelmed. Defeated. The difference mattered, because Sarah wasn't someone who surrendered easily. She entered without speaking, sat at the kitchen table, then placed a photograph between us. I stared at it. At first I didn't understand. Then my stomach dropped. The image showed security footage captured nearly 24 hours before the first officially recorded attack. A parking lot, morning traffic, ordinary people, ordinary life. Except for one thing. Several individuals stood completely motionless, watching. Not each other. Specific people. The same behavior we'd seen repeatedly. The same behavior Megan had unknowingly witnessed before the outbreak. Sarah slid another photograph forward, then another, then another. Different cities, different states, different days, same pattern. Watching, waiting, observing. Always somebody familiar, always somebody connected, always somebody known. I looked at Sarah. What does this mean? She laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because she'd run out of better reactions. I think the outbreak started earlier than anyone realized. Megan folded her arms. How much earlier? Sarah's answer chilled me. We don't know. That uncertainty changed everything, because humanity had spent 2 weeks searching for patient zero, searching for the beginning, searching for the first infection, the first victim, the first mistake. But maybe there wasn't one. Maybe the outbreak wasn't an explosion. Maybe it was a slow, invisible process people only noticed once violence began. Maybe the real beginning happened weeks earlier, or months. Maybe warning signs surrounded everyone, and nobody recognized them. Just like nobody recognized Megan's warning. Later that afternoon, another realization emerged. One none of us wanted. One none of us could avoid. Megan wasn't simply the first witness. She was the first person who reported what she saw. The distinction mattered. Because once we reviewed early statements collected by Sarah's team, a horrifying pattern appeared. Thousands of people had noticed strange behavior, but almost none reported it. They dismissed it, rationalized it, ignored it. Someone staring too long, someone appearing unexpectedly, someone behaving strangely. Human beings are experts at explaining away discomfort. We tell ourselves stories. We normalize anomalies. We preserve our sense of order. Megan didn't. She trusted what she saw. That was the difference. Not intelligence, not luck, not special knowledge. Attention, honesty, the willingness to admit something felt wrong. Near sunset, we heard engines. Several vehicles approached the neighborhood. A convoy. Not military, not government. Survivors. Families. Cars loaded with supplies, children, pets. People searching for somewhere stable. Somewhere human. The neighborhood welcomed them. Not because resources were abundant, because isolation was becoming its own threat. Over the next several hours, conversations spread across driveways and porches. Stories emerged. Different cities, different experiences, different losses. Yet every story contained one familiar detail. A warning ignored, an observation dismissed. An uncomfortable truth rejected until it became undeniable. The pattern wasn't limited to Megan. It was everywhere. The outbreak had succeeded because reality always arrives before belief. And belief always arrives late. That night I sat outside with Megan. The first peaceful moment we'd shared in days. Stars filled the sky. No sirens, no helicopters, no emergency broadcasts. Just quiet. A fragile kind of quiet, the kind that exists after something breaks. Megan leaned against me. You know what bothers me most? I looked at her. What? She stared toward the dark street. I wasn't trying to save the world. The statement surprised me. What do you mean? Her voice softened. When I called you that morning, she paused. I only wanted one person to believe me. The words hit harder than I expected, because they were true. She hadn't asked for attention, or recognition, or authority. She simply wanted trust. trust from the person closest to her. And I hadn't given it. Not immediately, not until reality forced me to. The guilt settled heavily inside me. Even now, years later. Maybe especially now. Because there are moments you never stop revisiting. Moments where different choices seem possible. Moments where you imagine another version of yourself. A better version. One who listens sooner. One who believes faster. One who doesn't require proof before offering trust. I wished I'd been that version. I still do. Just before midnight, Sarah prepared to leave. At the door, she stopped, turned toward us, and smiled for the first time since the outbreak began. A small smile, a tired smile. But real. What? I asked. She shook her head. Nothing. Then why are you smiling? Sarah looked at Megan, then at me, then toward the neighborhood outside. The new families, the survivors, the people still helping each other despite everything. And finally she answered, because the outbreak keeps teaching the same lesson. What lesson? Her smile widened slightly. People are stronger together than apart. Then she left, and for the first time in weeks, I found myself hoping she was right. It's been 3 years since Megan called me crying from a grocery store parking lot. 3 years since she told me something impossible. 3 years since I almost dismissed the most important warning of my life. The world that exists now is smaller, slower, different. Some cities survived, others didn't. Some communities rebuilt, others vanished. Humanity endured. Not because we were prepared, not because we were smart, because enough people chose to keep trusting each other when fear made isolation seem safer. Megan still hates being called the first witness. People use that phrase sometimes. Researchers, survivors, journalists. She always corrects them. She says she wasn't the first witness. She was simply the first person who refused to ignore what she saw. Maybe that's true. Maybe thousands saw the same signs. Maybe millions. We'll never know. What I do know is this. 3 hours before the outbreak, my wife called me crying. She told me the truth. Nobody believed her, including me. And whenever people ask what caused the collapse, I think about that phone call. Not because it contained answers, because it revealed something simpler. The most dangerous thing in the world isn't a virus. It isn't a zombie. It isn't even fear. It's the distance between seeing the truth and accepting it. Sometimes that distance is measured in years. Sometimes it's measured in moments. For us, it was measured in 3 hours. And 3 hours was enough to change the world forever.